The reinterpretation of culturally impactful texts allows us to analyse current-day values by comparing them to those of the past. Chirac, a 2015 film by acclaimed director Spike Lee, is one such example, looking at the past through Lysistrata and appropriating it to examine the present. Lysistrata is a 411 BC Greek comedy by Athenian playwright Aristophanes. The play tells the story of the titular Lysistrata, an Athenian woman who successfully convinces many other women to go on a sex strike in order to stop the Peloponnesian War between the Athenians and Spartans. The play begins by introducing women from various parts of Greece who discuss the ongoing war. She explains the solution to the war is through a sex strike, and the women take an oath of abstinence over a bowl of wine. They somehow capture the Acropolis, and two choruses are introduced in this part of the play, one of women, the other of men. Unlike previous dialogue, the chorus's lines are written in various rhyming meters, such as iambic heptameter. Rhyming dialogue was used by Aristophanes to engage and entertain the audience, as it was appealing to listen to. Spike Lee's Chirac recontextualizes this rhyming by having characters rap most of their lines. This ties into one of the central themes of the film, an exploration of the culture, both good and bad, of people of colour. Lee incorporates rap into his film as a way of relating the rhyming speech in Lysistrata to African American culture, juxtaposing the two vastly different cultures while also noting their similarities. Near the end of the play, a Spartan herald enters and explains to the Athenians that the Spartan women are also abstaining from sexual intercourse until a treaty is resolved. Both sides call out Lysistrata, who resolves the conflict by allocating land rights to either side. Lysistrata has lasted as a text of cultural value because it explores and gives insight into the politics of both gender and war in ancient Greek society, and calls out inequalities like the unfair perceptions of women. For example, Aristophanes points out how society unfairly perceives older women. In conversation between Lysistrata and an Athenian magistrate, she says it is unfair that older women are seen as worthless simply because they are old. The magistrate says, "Does not a man age?" And Lysistrata responds, "Not in the same way. He, if he wishes, can choose out a wife, but she remains lonely the rest of her life." Her reply points out how while men are still valued when old, women are seen as unworthy of love and value. Lysistrata also gives insight into the politics of gender and war by exploring women's suffering in war. Lysistrata's motivation for ending the war between the Spartans and the Athenians is the experiences of suffering shared between the women on both sides, who are afraid for their fighting husbands and sons. Lysistrata asks the magistrate, "What of us then, whoever in vain for our children must weep, born but to perish afar and in vain?" This highlights women's suffering as a result of war, which is more often neglected than that of men's. The exploration of war is one of the themes of Spike Lee's Chirac, which recontextualizes the plot and themes of Lysistrata and explores them from a modern-day standpoint of gang violence and racism. Chirac is set in present-day Chicago and tells the story of Lysistrata, an African-American woman and girlfriend to Demetrius Dupree. Dupree is the leader of the Spartans gang and is at war with the rival Trojans, led by a one-eyed man named Cyclops. After seeing a young girl accidentally killed in the crossfire between the gangs, Lysistrata gets a group of both Spartan and Trojan women to go on a sex strike until the two gangs can stop their feud. They take over an armory by seducing its soldiers, which the men try and fail to take over. Eventually, Dupree offers a deal with Lysistrata: have sex, and whoever climaxes first must agree to the other's demands. Lysistrata agrees, but the two are interrupted by Cyclops, who announces that he will disband the Trojans if the sex strike ends. A treaty is organised, and the gang war is resolved. Spike Lee embraces the fact that Chirac is based on Lysistrata. The plot itself follows almost the exact same structure. Lysistrata keeps her name, and Aristophanes is even mentioned by Dolomedes, a character who acts similarly to how the chorus would in ancient Greek plays, by speaking directly to the audience.
And in the style of his time, Aristophanes made that shit right.
Lee constantly reminds the audience of the connections between the two texts so they may reflect upon the societal values of both and how they have changed over time. One cultural value Lysistrata and Chirac share is the value of war within society. Both texts look at the impacts of war on women and children who do not fight but are still affected by it. However, Chirac looks at a more recently formed type of war, gang wars within African American communities. It is important to note that many of Lee's films explore ideas of race and racial violence, from his most acclaimed work, Do the Right Thing, to his most recent film, BlacKkKlansman. In this case, Lee is combining ideas of racial violence and the impact of war, putting a modern spin on a millennia-old story to show how violence has changed shape over centuries of progress. Lee also analyses why there is such a disproportionate amount of violence within African American communities. He puts forward multiple reasons within the film, like the NRA and racism-fueled massacres, such as the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing and even the Charleston Church shooting of 2015, the same year the film was released. Lee used these relevant and topical references to highlight the discrimination faced by people of colour and how it shapes their worldview. The choice of basing the film on Lysistrata was made to show how violence is as prevalent within human society today as it was millennia ago, just in different forms that hurt different people for different reasons. Spike Lee takes a historic cultural tale and reappropriates aspects of it in order to entertain his audience while also making them reflect on contemporary issues such as race, gender and war. He combines a historical story with modern day values so he may examine what has changed in our society and what has remained the same.